everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad to have you with me here today. I hope you're all doing well. Before we start this video, I want to remind you all to like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell thingy so you can be notified of every upload. I don't understand why they added this feature, as if whenever I subscribe to a YouTube channel, I don't think, oh, just like surprise me with which uploads you inform me of. No, I want to be informed of all of them. So anyway, turn on the notification bell thing so you can be notified of every upload, leave a comment, share the video, what have you. I'd also like to extend a huge thank you to the people who support this channel on Patreon. Their names are going to be listed at the end of the video. If you'd also like to support this channel on Patreon, I'll leave a link down below, but there are no hard feelings if you can't. I certainly understand money being tight, but there will be hard feelings if you don't follow me on Instagram because that is free. My email is also going to be down below in case you need to get in touch with me for any reason. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard about the massive storm that hit the Pacific Northwest a few weeks ago, but it was quite a doozy. There were very strong winds that took down several trees, including one in my own front yard that fell and blocked the street, and it also took out some of the power lines, leaving me without power for 6 days, which was miserable. It was dark, it was cold, the house was about 38 degrees Fahrenheit for that entire time. It was miserable. Now, whenever something like this happens, I invariably get somebody saying to me something along the lines of, well, I bet now you're glad you don't live in the past, huh? Because if you did, it would be like this all the time. Now, first of all, I never said I wanted to live in the past, so remove the smug smile from your face, hypothetical person. Second of all, it's just not true, depending on the era we're talking about. For prior to 1850, that's more likely to be the case, but still not really. But especially after you pass 1850, losing power in the 21st century is just a really bad analog for everyday life in the second half of the 19th century. And as a quick disclaimer, in this video, I'm going to be referring pretty much exclusively to people from the lower middle class all the way up to the upper class between the years of 1850 and 1920. That's not to say that what I'm going to say in this video wouldn't apply to some lower class people or lower class people. That's not the nicest way of putting that, is it? To poor people or to people before the mid-19th century. I'm just focusing on the area that I know best. Really, the things that are impacted the most when electricity goes out is the lack of heat and the lack of light. So would a Victorian home have been cold and dark all winter long? If it was 1895, would I just be sitting shivering in a 38-degree home all winter long? No, I wouldn't be. Thank you for watching. Okay, I'm joking. There's more to the video than just that. By the late 19th century, electricity was starting to become a real contender against gas and oil for lighting purposes, but it was by no means ubiquitous yet. Because electricity was not ubiquitous, even in the houses that had it, they weren't going to be entirely dependent on it, that meant that people were much more equipped to live without electricity. For example, they knew how to plan their days so that their activities that required a large amount of light would get finished during the daylight hours, and then activities that didn't require as much light could be done in the evening by lamplight. Speaking of light, most people today are pretty much entirely dependent on electric light. Some people will have battery-powered lanterns or emergency candles, but some people don't even have those. Conversely, in the 19th century, people had a lot of various methods for obtaining light. Most houses at the time would have had a large number of paraffin-burning oil lamps, candles, electricity, gas lights, and also wood or coal fires. With some or all of these methods of lighting going at once, a house could be maintained relatively well lit, even in the dark. Now, it probably wouldn't be quite as well lit as a 21st century electrically lit house when the electricity is working, but it would still certainly be bright enough to see. Additionally, some of these light sources, like oil lamps and candles, were mobile. They weren't fixed to the wall or to the ceiling, and they also weren't dependent on being plugged in anywhere. So you could bring them wherever you wanted. So you could bring all of your oil lamps into one room and keep that one room very well lit. On the other hand, nowadays, light sources tend to be much more stationary, either because they're attached to the ceiling or they need to be plugged into a wall socket. So that means that you can't really bring all of your different light sources into one room if you need to. So although it's true that in the 19th century homes were dimmer than the modern home when the electricity is working, 19th century homes were on average almost certainly brighter than a modern home when the electricity is not working, because they had diversified their light sources and their lighting fuels. The next topic of discussion is heat. Now, as I've said already, my house hovered at around 38 degrees Fahrenheit for about 6 days' time. I could see my own breath inside. I slept in a sleeping bag that was placed practically in the fireplace, and at the very worst of it, I wore my tea gown for about 72 hours straight because I could not bear the thought of undressing and exposing myself to the cold. So is this how Victorian people live every winter? No, it isn't. While it's true that central heating, as we have it today, wasn't really a thing in the 19th century, they had plenty of tricks and methods for keeping themselves warm. Things like wood stoves or coal stoves, kitchen ranges, and even paraffin-powered space heaters would keep a house nice and toasty. I come from Maine, and 7.8% of Mainers heat their homes with wood stoves. Maine has the second highest population of people who heat their homes with wood stoves, coming in behind Vermont, which has a whopping 12.3% of its population heating with wood stoves. Maine and Vermont are two of the coldest states in the Union, so the fact that so many people in both of these states are able to heat their homes exclusively with wood stoves should serve as a testament to how well wood stoves work. In fact, if you'll permit me to be anecdotal for a moment, some very close family friends of mine are part of that 7.8% of Mainers who heat their home with a wood stove, and I can personally testify that their house is always nice and warm and toasty on cold winter nights, and they have heated their home with a wood stove for years. Now I want you to imagine that instead of having a modern wood stove, you have a wood stove that is 3 or 4 times larger than the modern wood stove. And because this is the stove on which you do all of your cooking, it's kept running pretty much all day. Now, this stove is going to keep your house very, very warm indeed. Not only is this going to keep the kitchen warm, but the kitchen range is going to produce enough warmth to heat the average house. Additionally, if the stovepipe runs up through the middle of the house, which it usually does, then it's going to radiate heat to all of the rooms through which it passes on its way up. Wood stoves and kitchen ranges are two remarkably effective ways that Victorian people had of heating their homes that we don't really have anymore. I mean, we have wood stoves, some people, but most people don't have wood stoves anymore. But they weren't the only ways that Victorians had of heating their homes. They also had paraffin-fueled space heaters. So not only are these a wonderful portable source of heat, magazines also mention that they're very good as sort of camp stoves to be used specifically during the summer months. This demonstrates how good, again, the kitchen range is at heating your house. The implication being that during the summer, it's hot, you don't want to light the whole big stove, it's going to make your house overheat. You're much more likely to want to use a little stove. It's still going to generate heat, but it's not going to generate as much heat. Also, this little stove is portable, so if you really wanted to, you could bring it outside to do your cooking out there, so it's not going to heat your house up. They also had stoves that are similar to modern propane stoves, except they ran on coal oil instead of propane. And these could go in any room of your house, and you guessed it, they could also be used for cooking. So on a very cold night, you could heat your tea kettle up right there in the parlor. You wouldn't have to get up and go into the kitchen, which is lovely. So all of those would help you to keep your house warm during the day. But what about at night? All of the methods that I mentioned of warming your house involve fire. And surely you're going to want to bank or extinguish your fire overnight. Oh, fireplaces. There were also wood-burning fireplaces. But surely you're going to want to bank or extinguish your fire overnight, and there are no electric blankets. So how are they staying warm in bed? Well, there are plenty of ways to warm a bed before getting into it that don't involve electricity. Hot water bottles, which are rubber, metal, or ceramic bottles generally wrapped up in a cloth, filled with boiling water and then placed into the bed before you get into it, will warm up the bed. Warming pans, which look kind of like a cooking pan with a lid on it and a long handle, would be filled with hot coals, and then they could be held in the bed to warm the sheets before getting in. You could also heat up a brick or a stone in the oven and wrap it in cloth, and it would serve the exact same function as a hot water bottle. So, an hour or so before going to bed, a Victorian could go into his room and either light the heater that was in there or bring a portable one in there, and then when it's time for bed, he could go into the now warm room and place a hot water bottle or a warm brick in his bed, or heat the sheets with a warming pan, change into his nightshirt, his night socks, and his bed cap, extinguish the heater, and then get into the nice warm bed. The residual heat from the now extinguished heater would stay in the room for several hours, as would the heat from the warm brick or hot water bottle or warming pan. This would allow our hypothetical Victorian to, 1, generate enough body heat to maintain the bed warm, and 2, fall asleep before the room got cold. When our hypothetical Victorian woke up in the morning, the room would likely be quite cold, but he could get up for a moment and light the heater, then go back to bed where it was warm, and then in a few minutes' time, the room would be nice and toasty and he could get up and comfortably dress himself. This is not so different from modern houses where we usually have our furnaces set to turn off at night or to go down at night, and then keep the house warmer during the day. Additionally, travel could be made comfortable by simply dressing up nice and warmly and having copious rugs and blankets in the carriages and sleighs, and train cars would oftentimes have little pot-bellied stoves in them to keep the cars warm. So in conclusion, the power going out in the 21st century does not give us an accurate view of what everyday life was like in the 19th century, because in the 19th century they were equipped to live without electricity. In the 21st century, we are not. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you back next time. Bye-bye.